In this lecture, we're going to cover complex inheritance patterns. The first pattern we'll talk about are polygenic traits. These are traits that are influenced by several genes. So rather than having just 2 alleles in a genotype, a polygenic trait might have 4 or 6 or even more alleles that impact the expression of the gene. An example of a polygenic trait would be skin color. So you can see here the genotype for skin color is not just 2 letters. This particular trait has 6 alleles, so it's impacted by 3 different genes, and so you can have a lot more variation in polygenic traits than you can in traits that are influenced by only 1 gene. So in this instance, we're going to look at the potential outcomes of 2 people if they decide to have kids. Who have very light skin because they have all recessive alleles in their genotype, and if they were to have children with someone who has very dark skin and has all of the dominant alleles in their skin, their children are going to be heterozygous for each of the 3 alleles, so they'll have skin with a middle tone color. But if 2 people who are heterozygous for skin color for all 3 genes were to have children, the amount of variation that their children could have in skin color is vast. So we'll look at the Punnett square next. So if 2 people who are heterozygous for each of the 3 genes that control skin color are going to have kids, the children that they have a much broader opportunity to inherit different combinations of genes. In fact, there's 64 different combinations of skin color that can result from these 2 people. And so it ranges from people who are very pale because they have all of the recessive alleles to people who have a middle skin tone because they have 3 recessive alleles and 3 dominant alleles, to people who have darker skin because they've got 4 alleles that are dominant and 2 recessive, and they could even have a child who has all of the dominant alleles and has very darkly pigmented skin. So what these genes control is the amount of melanin that is produced by skin cells, because melanin is the pigment that gives skin its color, and these genes simply control the amount of melanin that is produced. Because of the law of averages, most people have skin color that is not all dominant or all recessive. So most people have skin color that falls somewhere in the middle, and these are just the kind of the most common skin colors found in people. And this really just has more to do with the fact that people have been around for a long time and have had kids with lots of other people, and so we've spread these genes very widely across the population. Another type of complex inheritance is called incomplete dominance, and this occurs when a dominant allele is unable to fully express itself when it is paired with a recessive allele. And that means that the phenotype that you get in a heterozygous individual is an intermediate between the dominant and recessive trait. So an example of this would be snapdragons, which are a type of a flower. Snapdragons can come in red and white, for example, and the red gene is dominant, and it's the genotype is capital R, and the white color is recessive, and the genotype is lowercase r. Now, because the gene for red is incompletely dominant, if a red flower and a white flower are bred together, they produce pink flowers that are big R, small r for their genotype, and the phenotype for big R, small r is pink because the red is not able to completely hide the white expression of the gene. Another type of complex inheritance has something to do with multiple alleles. So this means that instead of having 2 alleles for a gene, there's more than 2. And an example of this is blood type. With blood type, there's actually 3 possible alleles instead of 2. And so blood type can have an A allele, a B allele, or the lowercase I actually gives you a type O blood, so we'll call it the O allele. Blood type determines what proteins are on the surface of a blood cell. So if you have type A blood, then you have these little green proteins, in this picture anyway, that are called the A antigen. If you have type B blood, you have these little blue circle proteins that are the B antigen. If you have type AB blood, you have both the AB or A and B antigens. And if you have type O blood, you don't have any of those antigen proteins on the surface of your blood cells. That's coded for by different genotypes. So O-type blood has 2 I's as its genotype, Type A blood, you can either be homozygous for the A, or you can be heterozygous and have A and then the O allele. If you have type B blood, you can have two B alleles or the B allele and the O allele. And if you have type AB blood, you're going to have an A allele and a B allele. Blood type is also another form of complex inheritance called codominance, and this means that both alleles are fully expressed if they're both in the genotype. So we go back to our chart. The reason that a person can have type AB blood is because when you have a codominant gene, then A is fully expressed and B is fully expressed, which means that you get a blood cell that has A antigens, remember those are the little green ones, and B antigens, those are the little blue ones. Another example of this, if you had a flower or a plant, for example, that had light patches on its leaves, if the dominant allele is capital T, it gives you markings on the ends of the leaves. If the gene gives you, or is recessive, it gives you the lowercase t, which is the markings on the inside of the leaf. If it's codominant, the intermediate heterozygous form, big T, small t, is going to have both markings because both traits are fully expressed. Another type of complex inheritance are X-linked traits or sex-linked traits. These are traits where the allele is located on the X chromosome. And both males and females have X chromosomes, and so they both can express traits, but they're not always expressed evenly because people who have two X chromosomes express sex-linked traits less frequently than people who have an X chromosome and a Y chromosome. And an example of this is color blindness. So here's a couple of Punnett squares we can go through that kind of explain how this is inherited. So if a woman has normal color vision, so she has two X chromosomes, she's not a carrier for color blindness. She'll have two X chromosomes that do not carry the gene for color blindness. And if she has children with a man who does have the color blindness allele, we'll give him an X with a little a here to show that he's affected with color blindness. And he has another chromosome in his sex chromosomes, but it's a Y, so he only has one X chromosome. Because this is a recessive trait and he only has one X chromosome, this man is going to be colorblind even though he only has one copy. When you do the Punnett square, you'll see that they are going to have potentially, they can have 4 different combinations of these chromosomes. If they have a daughter who's XXA, she's a carrier, but she's not affected because she's got 2 X chromosomes. And you'll see that both of their daughters are in fact carriers. If they have a son, neither of their sons will be carriers because they don't carry the affected gene. So they will both have color vision. And the reason is because a man cannot pass an X chromosome to his son. A man can only pass on a Y chromosome to sons. Another example, here we have a father who does not have color blindness, but the female, the mother, is a carrier. So she's got that X with the A. And so they have the potential of having a daughter who's a carrier. We'll just abbreviate that. They have a son who's colorblind. We'll call him CB. And then they've got 2 children here who are unaffected. So that's the way that these traits are passed on. And the reason that they're seen more frequently in people with XY chromosomes is because it's not carried on the Y chromosome, so the X is expressed even if it's recessive. Red-green color blindness can be a problem, and that's the kind most people have because they're less able to differentiate between the colors red and green because they're kind of close to each other on the visible light spectrum. And the cells that you have in your eyes, some of the ones that they need to see those 2 colors are missing, and so they can see some colors but not red and green. This is a picture that you would be shown if they're checking to see if you have color blindness. So if you're colorblind, you're not able to see the number that's in the center of the circle. So if you are able to see the number, you should see a number 2 that's in the picture. And on the next slide, we'll see what it looks like for someone who's colorblind. So someone who's colorblind would see a pattern like this, where the number is less distinguishable or not distinguishable at all. This is another example of one of those plates so that you can see what color it is, or you can see if you're colorblind. So this one you should see a 45. There's two more, so this one you should see a number 5. And on the last color plate, you should be looking for a number 56. So I can draw it so you can see where it belongs.